everyone. Welcome to the BSB Bookathon Fall Edition. Welcome, everyone, to our reading today. We have with us Miss Annie McDonald and Miss Justine Saracen, and I am Vali. Hopefully, everybody knows everyone. And in a few minutes, Carson Tate is also going to be joining us. She's going to be about 5 minutes late. So the way we're going to work it today is I'll introduce the reader. They'll give you a short introduction of themselves and the book they'll be reading from, and then they'll go ahead and read. And then once that happens, well, go through some questions and answers. But like I just said, if you have any questions for the author, any of the authors, please go ahead and put those either in the chat roll or in the question and answer bar, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. So I would like to start with Miss Annie McDonald. So if you take it away, Annie. And if you're not reading, could you go ahead and just mute yourself and turn off your video? Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Allie. Welcome to the Bookathon. This is my actual first reading it's actually of my second book. My first book, Where We Are, came out last year in December of 2019. And my second book is coming out. It's actually already out. It looks something like this. You can see it. It is called When Sparks Fly. So I'm going to start my reading by just a brief introduction to what's been happening in the story, and I'll pick up the reading from there. Luca McCaffrey and Daniela Waveney first met after a devastating on-ice collision knocked Luca out of competitive hockey forever. Now, almost 15 years later, Danny is forced by an as-yet undiagnosed illness to leave her work with an international medical organization and return to her parents' home in northern Manitoba. After a few run-ins, their paths have crossed again, this time at Danny's parents' home, where Danny's mother, hoping to entice Luca, now a rising ironwork sculptor, to create a work for the local museum. And she's invited Luca to the Waveney's home for dinner. Danny has been out for a run, and this is where we're going to pick up. Danny's dad was right when he called her a terrible patient, an impatient patient. She laughed, hopeful that the shower would drown out the sound. It had only been 3 weeks since she'd come back from Guyana, and just over 10 days since her fever had broken. It was no wonder that her attempt at an evening run had been nothing more than a brisk walk, and she'd only had enough energy to make it around the block. She checked the sense of discouragement and shook her head with resignation. Since being discharged from the hospital, workouts were clearly at the mercy of the roller coaster she'd been riding for over a month. She wondered if the best plan for the rest of the night was to head to bed, until thoughts of her parents' dinner guest came to mind. Danny remembered more about the enigmatic Luca McCaffrey than she'd wanted to admit. In fact, well before she had tended to the fallen player on the ice years ago, she'd taken notice of Luca around the rink, often watching undetected as she'd warmed up before games by running the arena stairs. During games, Luca had been so much faster to the puck than any of the other players. Danny noticed that her strength had seemed so easy, so natural. She also remembered Luca's river-bottom blue eyes. Then, like now, it would have been easy for her to drown in them. Danny was no expert when it came to flirting, but she suspected that Luca had done exactly that at the rink last week when she'd slipped while trying to retrieve a wayward puck. Luca held her in her arms just that moment longer than necessary. Her skin tingled on the back of her neck as she recalled Luca's closeness, the way she'd leaned forward and breathed in her scent. It was all so subtle and sensual. But as quickly as those memories ignited a fire in Danny's body, they were doused by her recollection of seeing Luca earlier in the week, arm in arm with her girlfriend. She felt a brisk rub of anger. There were always women willing to play at cheating, and clearly Luca was a player. Yet in spite of the fact that Danny refused to play along, she could not stop thinking of her. Creating an emotionally healthy distance from Luca going forward made complete sense, perfect sense, but the warm water of the shower washed away her resolve. She imagined how Luca's athletic body would feel against her own, and her skin shivered unnervingly at the mere thought. Danny's fatigue abated, and she began to respond excitedly and energetically to a much deeper warmth. She ran her soapy fingers down the length of her arms, then back up, across her breasts, circling them before moving slowly down her abdomen. Her breath became deep and even. She leaned into the shower wall and allowed her mind to float freely, accepting that she would not be going to bed early, not while Luca was under the same roof. On her way to wash her hands, Luca crossed the foyer and ended up in a hallway lined with family pictures taken in exotic locations. The Waveney's were well-traveled. She couldn't resist pausing to look at several photos depicting Danielle as a child. She appeared timid but happy, especially in the photos shared with her parents. Luca smiled back at the images before turning down the hall. As she approached the powder room door, she noticed it was closed. She couldn't imagine that Danny was still cleaning up after her run, but as she lifted her hand to knock, the door flew open and a downcast, towel-wrapped body stepped across the threshold and almost straight into her. Luca half leapt backward, far enough that she pulled up flush against the wall opposite the door, knocking 2 of the photographs off their hooks. She spread her arms at her sides and tiptoed awkwardly to keep against the wall, pinning the askewed photos in place. She held her breath, imagining she looked a bit like a tipsy scarecrow. Danny stood before her, wrapped snugly in a white towel that contrasted exceptionally well with the long, wet, wavy hair that fell onto her dark, softly sculptured shoulders. Her long neck tapered beautifully with her collarbone ridges, and her flawless skin caused Luca's jaw to drop. As she raggedly exhaled, she could only imagine how Danny would taste, like cinnamon. Danny felt like she had been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. Not 5 minutes before, she'd been acting on fantasies featuring the sexy woman who she'd now just about collided with. My legs are still wobbly, for God's sake, she thought. She could feel Luca's eyes on her exposed skin, and her legs wobbled a bit more. A little help here? Luca asked. Rather than rush to her assistance, Danny took the time to appreciate the sight, biting back a smile. You're actually enjoying this, aren't you? Luca asked, clearly struggling to hold up the precariously hanging photos. Maybe a bit, Danny said, amused enough with the predicament to lower her guard and smile. After another moment, she tucked the towel more securely and stepped forward to hold the frames in place while Luca turned and set them right. When Luca finally looked at her, Danny caught a flicker in the eyes gazing into hers that made her feel as though her towel was no longer there. Her smile faded as an overpowering sense of vulnerability swept over her. The guest powder room is that way, she managed, pointing toward the entrance to the hall, on the other side of the foyer near the front door. My bad, Luca said while sliding carefully out from between Danny and the wall. Danny tightened her hold on the towel while she watched Luca head back. After a moment and a deep breath, she forced her legs to unwobble just enough to take her back to the bedroom. Luca made her way back across the lobby, and once the door to the powder room was secure behind her, she leaned on the sink and exhaled deeply. She could still feel the heat that had radiated from Danny's body, penetrating into hers. Her brain was clouded with a perfume of clean cotton, like a white sheet hanging on the clothesline on a sunny summer day. Once her head cleared and her heartbeat normalized, she made her way back to the kitchen where the Waveneys were setting dish after dish on the island. Luca was relieved that Danny hadn't returned yet, but only because, while her hands were clean, her thoughts were still very dirty.
Ooh, that sounds good. Thank you. You did wonderful. This is Annie's first reading, so virtually, hopefully. So you did a fantastic job. I just wanted to ask you a quick question. I saw that you want to write a book set in every province of Canada.
That is correct.
How many is that?
Well, there are 10 provinces and 3 territories. I might combine the Atlantic provinces where I live into one grouping, so it may end up 10 books in total, maybe 11. I don't know. It's just a wait and see, but that's my plan. I live in Canada. I enjoy Canada. I love my country, and I just want to. I've traveled across it, and I would like to write and hopefully entice people to come and visit. When COVID is
I'll be saying that too. I think some of the other people too, once this election is over. depending on how it turns out. I might be a proud Canadian too. Just never know. But and welcome to the U.S. and congratulations. Annie just got married.
I did.
So that's a very exciting news. Very exciting.
Yes.
So, the next person we have up is Justine, and Justine is a master of writing the historical novel. So Justine, tell us a little bit about yourself and about the book you're going to read, and if everyone else can put themselves on mute and turn their video off so it won't be distracting, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, as Ali said, excuse me, I'm a little bit hoarse. It's a normal hoarseness because it's nearly midnight. Doesn't mean anything. I write historical novels, and I write a lot of novels about World War II. This one is about the Norwegian resistance, and it's because I'm lately, well, not lately, but much of my life, fascinated by snow, and I find snow the most romantic of all environments. And so I've combined a World War II story with the Sami people, the Laplanders, who are the quintessential Scandinavian people of the snow. And so this deals with our heroine carrying out an actual historical mission during World War II, but being cared for when she's injured by the Sami people. It starts with her in a plane crash. She's the only survivor, and she wanders for days in the snow, and she nearly dies. She's rescued by the Sami, who happen to be. She falls down on a migration route, and is rescued by the Sami and carried off in a sled to their village. And this is the following day. The Sami heroine is called Marit, and the Norwegian woman who is on the mission, which fails, is called Kirsten. It's our winter home. Marit swept her hand in an arc over the landscape of snow-covered huts, then unharnessed the draft reindeer and lifted the injured calf out of the sled onto the ground. It stood bleeding for a moment, then lurched awkwardly toward its mother. She waved over one of the other Sami to help lift Kirsten out of the sled, and supporting her, they led her to the hut. Kirsten crawled painfully through the entrance and looked up, sweeping her gaze around the long poles rising side by side to a smoke hole at the top. She could just make out the rows of bark that encircled them on the outside layer of sod. This was Sami guati. Deerskin were laid out as insulation over a bedding of twigs, and her fire sent up smoke through the hole. The old woman knelt at the rear of the hut, flanked by boxes and sacks of utensils. She had just lit a fire in the center of the hut and hung a cauldron over it, filled with snow. Cozy, Kirsten said. If you have enough food and firewood, you can last the winter. The Sami have for thousands of years. Marit sat down beside her, and the two men followed her in. They unwound strips of woven cloth from their ankles and tugged off their reindeer hide shoes, scraped out the grass padding inside, and hung it here and there to dry. Unnervingly taciturn, the Sami men lay back to rest. As the warmth took hold, Marit removed her cap, and long, light brown hair tumbled out. As the warmth took hold, let's take a look at your feet now, she said, and helped Kirsten unlace her boots. They managed to tug off only the right one, and the left one would not move. It's frostbite, isn't it? Kirsten groaned. Probably. Marit unlaced the boot completely, then gripped both sides, peeling them away from the foot. Inch by inch, she managed to draw the foot out. Wincing, Kirsten slid off her woolen sock and was shocked at what she saw. The entire lower part of her foot was swollen, and all her toes were blistered. The big toe was bright red, and the two center ones were yellow balloons. Clenching her teeth, Kirsten turned it slightly. My ankle hurts like hell, but my foot feels nothing. If you could walk at all before we found you, your ankle isn't broken, just sprained. but your toes are frostbitten. No sign of gangrene, though. It looks like you got off lightly. Jova, one of the old Sami, set down a pan filled with water. Let's get this over with. Marit placed Kirsten's feet gently in the water. The water was pleasant on Kirsten's heels, but as the frozen flesh began to thaw, the prickling and burning became excruciating, and she moaned through clenched teeth. Marit grimaced in sympathy. The pain's a good sign. It shows that the flesh underneath is still viable, but you have to be vigilant that the toes don't freeze again. We'll have to help you walk for a while. How can I walk in the snow without my boots? Marit turned and spoke to the old lady in Sami. She seemed initially resistant, but then grunted and rummaged in one of her boxes. Finally, she drew out a pair of deerskin shoes in the Sami style, with high backs and pointed toe that curved upward. Marit set the shoes beside Kirsten. My grandmother has agreed to lend you these. They're my brother's dress-up shoes, but he wore them only once before She stopped. He doesn't wear them? He's dead. Marit said abruptly, then changed the subject. They're large and your swollen feet will have plenty of room. Marit lowered her eyes. Please tell her I'm grateful. She lifted her feet from the pan of water, and Marit wiped them dry. With the treatment finished, everyone fell silent, and Kirsten took the moment to study the faces of her rescuers. She hadn't seen many Sami up close, but the grandparents seemed to fit the image. Well, instead of reading it, let me finish just describing it with a few minutes that I have left. This is a community of people that has all but disappeared. The Sami that are still in Norway, Sweden, and in Finland are well integrated into the Norwegian culture the same way that Native Americans are pretty much integrated into white American culture. So it takes her a long time to get to know them and to get to know how to survive in the snow. And when she finally recovers, then she embarks with Marit on the mission that she was sent there in the first place to break into a Norwegian power plant and steal materials necessary for the Allies. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. That sounds another fascinating book. This is what, your sixth book and set in World War II?
In World War II, yeah, 6. I've got 13 altogether, but only 6 in the World War II. The others are earlier historical periods.
Yeah, Sistine Heresy is still one of my favorite books. How long does it take you? Because I know you put some real people in the books, and obviously the situation is these people existed. So how long does it take the research that you put into these books?
Well, this one took 2 years. Of course, a lot of reading. Then I went to Finland and met Sami. But that's how I realized that you cannot go into a Sami village anymore. They don't live like they did in the 19th and early 20th century. And they only wear these kinds of outfits on special occasions. Yeah. And for tourists. And you can buy it. This one I happen to make, but you can get them. But the reindeer culture is still there. They don't have big migrations, but the reindeer are there. I met some reindeer. I fed them food, I petted them, and I rode on a sled with them. So it took about 2 years before I finally had it all together to write it into a novel.
Well, cool. Interesting. Thanks, Justine. Now, then, next person up. Thank you for joining us. Gunn was supposed to be joining us, but unfortunately, she's a little under the weather. So we wish her well. Hopefully some hot tea will fix her right up. But the very famous Carson Tate has blessed us with her presence. As you can tell, Justin, Carson and I are good friends. Thanks so much for the last minute come in. Now, I know you have a novel that came out the same month as mine, so I'm sure that's what we'll be reading from today. So if you could introduce yourself, even though we all know who you are.
I didn't mean to leave.
Yeah. You got to show us a picture of the novel. So.
Yeah, I do. So,
yes.
So this is Best Practice. It is the third book in the Sexy Legged Lawyer series.
I want to meet some of these women where these pictures have come from.
Well, they only have legs, apparently. Nothing above the waist.
So,
In
Ms.
all
Carl-
seriousness, so it's legal affairs romances. But so Allie's disappeared now, but I'll just keep talking. So this.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, take it away. I didn't want to cut into your time.
Allie, I'm gonna take
And then
like a
Stan
half hour
accuses me of talking too much, and then I get in trouble. So
I know. You and me both, kiddo.
Tell us a little bit about the book. And then,
I will.
Yeah.
So the series is about three best friends. They get fed up for working for the grind of big law, which is big law firms, lots of billable hours, being bossed around and doing grunt work. So they go out on their own and they form a small boutique practice in Austin, Texas. So this installment, which is the third book in the series, they're all standalones, but I think it's a richer experience if you read them all, but you don't have to. This installment features Grace Maldonado, who's one of the named partners in the firm, and Perry Clark, who is the younger sister of Grace's best friend Campbell, who was featured in book 1, Practice Makes Perfect. So it's an age gap, kind of class gap, and then best friend sister trope in this one. At the beginning of the book, Perry, who is also an attorney, has fled Crimea, where she's been working on a human rights case that went sideways. She winds up in London, but she doesn't have a passport. And Grace appears to help her out with the embassy there. In this scene I'm about to read, they're killing time while they're waiting on a decision from the embassy. And Grace is tasked with trying to talk Perry into coming back to Austin, because she's been in many brushes with danger in her travels around the world, and her sister wants her home. So they've just left the London Eye. That was Perry's choice for an adventure, and now they're going to do something Grace wants to do. So I'm queued up and ready if you are.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have. I'm going to ask you a little bit about the experience later on. I'm sure you have some experience with it.
Okay. Grace pointed at the row of bicycles and grinned at Perry. See? Wheels, but the kind that stay on the ground. Perry's eyes narrowed. What is happening right now? Grace took a moment to take in the scene. They were in an alley of sorts next to a pub. The alley was lined with a dozen retro-style bicycles, complete with sweet little baskets. And standing in front of the bikes was a tall, thin, older gentleman wearing a tweed cap, checked pants, and a vest. He was explaining the rules of the road. She turned to Perry and motioned between them. You, me, gin, bicycles, and markets. We're going on a bicycle tour. A slow smile spread across Perry's face, and she looked eager as she had when they boarded the Eye. Heck yeah, we are. What a great idea. Not too stodgy? Well, aside from the Oliver Twist-looking guy standing over there, not stodgy at all. Do we get to pick which bike we want? Grace watched as Perry surveyed the bicycles, proud she'd picked an activity they'd both enjoy, and glad the tour had a couple of last-minute openings. Plus, there would be gin. An hour later, they'd seen the Tate Museum, the oldest church in London, the Shard, and they'd narrowly avoided getting smacked by a bus that cut between the two of them and the rest of the cyclists on the tour. And you thought the Eye was dangerous, Perry shouted from behind Grace. Do you want to take the lead? Grace slowed down, acutely conscious of the fact Perry was behind her, and she figured she was chomping at the bit to go faster. She waved her arm. Go on ahead. Perry pulled forward, her legs pumping and her face wearing a broad smile. This was the best idea ever, she called out as she whizzed by. When do we get to the next market? Before she could answer, Perry shouted, Where's the rest of the group? Grace looked around, but she didn't see any of the other cyclists or their tour guide. Pull up over there for a second, she said, motioning to a line of hedges. She followed Perry up on the sidewalk, certain the group couldn't be far away. She was just starting to slow down when a couple walking down the sidewalk abruptly turned to face her. The woman shook her fist in the air. Get off the sidewalk! You're breaking the law! The shout took her by surprise, and Grace nearly fell off her bike. She felt an arm reach out to steady her and looked up to see Perry standing next to her. "I've got you." Time suspended and the noise of the city fell away. For a second, they were just simply two women far from home, connected by a love of adventure and the comfortable ease of having known each other most of their lives. But for the shouting locals and the stomach-lurching heights of the eye, Grace would consider this day a perfect date. Oh, and if Perry weren't her best friend's sister. But she was. So Grace slowly backed out of Perry's embrace and swiftly changed the subject. Did that really just happen? Perry raised her fist in the air. "You mean the part where you are breaking the law?" she said, over-exaggerating the war cry of the angry local. Yep, Grace Maldonado, chief rule follower and barrister of great renown, was just accused of violating the laws of a foreign land. They both laughed, and Grace asked, "What do you mean, chief rule follower?" Perry's brow furrowed. "Come on, admit it. You're like the high priestess of regulations." "Am not. R2. Why do you think Campbell and Abby made you the managing partner of the firm?" A bunch of reasons popped in her head, but they all supported Perry's general proposition. She was the most responsible one, so she didn't bother listing them. "Okay, then, I'm going to take that as a compliment. Rules are good. They keep order in the universe." "Sure, but people find ways to bend them all the time in the name of whatever order they prefer. People of privilege, anyway. I've been working in areas of the world where rules don't matter unless you're white and privileged and rich. Rich really helps." Grace started to point out that the only person in this conversation who was white was Perry, and they were both privileged by virtue of where they'd grown up and their families. But instead, she bit her tongue and let Perry ruminate for a moment to see if she came to the same conclusion. "Yeah, I'm sorry, that came out wrong," Perry said. "There's so much injustice in the world, it swallows me up sometimes." "I get it," Grace said. "I really do. But if you dwell on it, you're going to be consumed." She pointed at Perry's bike. "Now get back on that thing, because today the rule follower is throwing all caution to the wind. I'm going to drink gin and eat fun foods and maneuver this bike around the streets of London like a pro. Are you with me?" Perry answered by straddling her bike and ringing the bell. "I am absolutely with you." She pointed at the road ahead. "If you can catch up with me." And just like that, an idea popped into Grace's head. "You know, if you're up for a challenge, I've got one for you. Bring it." The eagerness in Perry's voice told Grace she had her hooked. She pointed at a spot in the distance. "I'll race you to that corner up there. If I win, when we get to Austin, you stay." Perry cocked her head to the side. "For how long?" "A week," Grace said, figuring she couldn't go for anything longer, but a week should give Campbell enough time to make her case to convince Perry to stay. "What happens if I win?" "Hell freezes over," Grace said. "If indeed such a cataclysmic event happens, then when we land in Austin, I'll personally book your flight to wherever you want." Perry narrowed her eyes like she was considering the proposal, and then without warning, she pushed away from the hedge and sped off. Grace watched her go, wanting to savor the moment, but then she pumped her pedals hard because she had to win this race. Best practice.
All right. How many times did you have to take that book tour? I mean, that bike tour before?
You know, I had to buy a lot of gin to write this book.
That never hurts. That never hurts.
I'm like Justine and you. I like to travel to a place to get the feel of it.
And like I said, it's always a good day when you can hear Carson speaking an English accent.
Said no British person ever.
Now, do you like writing in books of three? I like writing in books of 10.
I'm a 3 or 4 book series kind of gal, but 3 seems like a good arc to me. And then I'm ready to move on to the next one.
No, this was a great, like, I mean, just me personally, but it was a very good series. So you know how much I love the series. So that is definitely something to come back for. But no, and we really enjoyed it. But thank you so much for coming today. Don't go anywhere. Inappropriate questions to ask you later. Don't go anywhere. Pour yourself a gin. So I will go last. I also have a book coming out same month as Carson and Justine, and I just dropped it on the floor, lost my place. It is One More Chance. This is a novel about exactly that. You get one more chance to get it right. Harry and Desi met in high school. They actually met in the third grade. They graduated together. They had a lot of plans to go forward into the future, and something very tragic happens. And so this is 16 years later. It's the emergency room at what everybody in New Orleans affectionately calls Big Charity. Harry is now an orthopedic surgeon, and Desi, unfortunately, is the person on the gurney, and she is there because she is a victim of domestic violence, but when she left Harry 16 years prior, it was abrupt and very sudden, which means abrupt, and with no explanation is what I meant to say. So Harry has been wondering all this time what the heck happened to her, and she is not a very happy camper that now all of a sudden here she is, and she's back, and she's the one that has to deal with her injury. So here's a little bit of One More Chance. Hey, I'm Sally, and I'm going to be your nurse. Dr. Basantes will be back shortly for your consult. You know, the decision is up to you. I don't usually give my opinion. There's no better orthopedic surgeon in the city. If she's available, don't turn her down. I'm sure it's her who'd rather not deal with me, Desi said with a raspy voice. Sally covered her with a warm blanket before hanging some smaller bags to add to her IV. Thank you. Do you know her? Sally sounded curious, but all Desi did was stare at Harry's back. I did, a very long time ago. She's got a loud bark, but she cares about her patients. I don't see that changing today, no matter what your history is. Sally combed Desi's hair back and smiled. Close your eyes and try to relax. Is there someone I can call for you? My sister, please. She couldn't stop the tears, but it wasn't from the pain. Harry's expression was all she needed to see to realize she'd never be forgiven for what she'd done. I'll take care of it if you give me the number, Sally said as she placed her x-rays where Harry could see them. Doc, your pictures are back. Harry nodded at Sally, then accepted a hug from a guy before turning back to whatever was on the desk in front of her. Jesus, what is she going to think of me? Desi whispered, never feeling as much shame as she did in this moment. She closed her eyes and remembered the first time they'd met. It was the first day of third grade, and the bus stop was crowded with children. Desi did her best to ignore them. They probably got lice, a tall redhead said with a sneer. Yeah, and where'd you get those shoes? The garbage? The brunette with her said. Don't listen to them, Rach. Desi put her arm around her little sister and moved farther away from the older girls who'd tortured Desi all last year. With Rachel starting kindergarten, they had 2 targets now. That's where they got those clothes, too. The redhead shoved Desi down this time, and Rachel started crying when she fell on her. She looked to the street when she heard a car door slam and a tall girl ran toward them. Leave them alone. The bullies listened when her new defender clenched her fist. Are you okay? The girl asked, offering her hand. I'm okay. Desi helped Rachel up and rubbed where her elbow had scraped the sidewalk. Rach, you okay? The woman in the car had stood back but came closer when she seemed to notice the tear in Desi's shirt. Are you two waiting for the bus? Yes, ma'am. She put her arm around Rachel again, and she could tell by the way her shoulders were shaking that she was still crying. I'm Harry, and this is my mom, Rosa. Harry had a big smile that was and was so much taller than the other kids around them. I know you aren't supposed to go with strangers, but you should ride with us. Your name is Harry? She held Rachel tighter against her, but didn't move away from the new girl. But you're a girl. My name is Harriet, but Harry fits better. Would you come with us? Harry held her hand out. I don't know. My dad might get mad. Do you live around here? It didn't sound like Harry was one to give up easily. What's your name? We live that way, and I'm Desi. This is my little sister, Rachel. She watched Rachel slowly extend her hand when Harry offered hers. Want to go over and talk to your dad? He's sleeping. The last thing she needed was to wake him. Are you sure, ma'am? Let's get you over there so you're not late on your first day, Rosa said, and then we'll introduce ourselves to your dad later. Rosa opened the back door of the nice car and made sure everyone buckled up. Once we see where your house is, Harry and I can pick you up from now on. It'll be great. You'll see. Harry held her hand, and she'd been right. That had been the beginning of their friendship, and it had only gotten closer through the years. Harry and her family had been the best thing that had happened to both her and Rachel, and she felt cherished like never before. Unlike the kids at the bus stop, Harry had never noticed their secondhand clothes or shoes with holes in the soles. They began to spend every weekend with Harry's family, and Rosa and Francisco, Harry's father, indulged in the same as Harry. It was the safest she'd ever been, but those memories had faded under the cruel reality she was living. She was brought back to the moment when Sally gently wiped a tear and then handed her a tissue. She's going to think you need a friend, and Harry's a good one, Sally said. That I already know. So that is a little bit of when, so if everybody could come back, we'll answer some questions. Of One More Chance. Like I said, it deals with some hard topics, but I think sometimes we have to talk to them, get them out in the light so that we can kind of get that out of the way and start to help people who are in those same situations. So, Annie, you still there? You haven't gone back to Canada, have you? All right.
I'm still here.
All right. No, I came up with a couple of questions for everybody. So, as a writer, what would you choose as your mascot, avatar, or spirit animal? So, Justine, what would you pick?
Avatar or spirit animal?
Spirit animal, yeah.
I don't have one unless it's my cat snuggled up on my lap. Otherwise, no.
Oh, okay. How about you, Carson? What's your spirit animal?
Yeah, I'm going to go with honey badger.
Honey badger don't care.
Oh no, you saw Sheldon Cooper. Sheldon Cooper saying that they were so ferocious. You did, didn't you?
Head down, keep going.
Yeah. How about you, Annie? What's your spirit animal?
Oh, I have a fondness for alpacas, but I love hummingbirds. They're my absolute favorite. I have feeders at my house, and I just watch them until they migrate down to warmer weather. I just really enjoy them. Yeah.
All right. I think mine would be like maybe a hyperactive ferret or something. I'm not really
I think we might be in the same group.
Exactly.
This sounds like a bizarre cage match. Hummingbird versus badger.
Exactly. So, how many unpublished or half-written novels do you have lying around your house? Annie, how about you?
I have started into number 3, but just barely. My first one, Where We Are, was actually the first book I ever even tried to write. So I really don't have any lying around. And I don't think you can count the ones you write for National Novel Writing Month as novels because no one really reads those. But they're fun to write. No editing, just write.
Just write. Well, sometimes that's what it takes. I mean, just get the word on the page. I don't believe in writer's block, but every once in a while the idea is kind of like, where'd they go? Come back, the voices, come back.
Two of my best-selling novels were novels I wrote during National Novel Writing Month.
Oh, wow, great.
Really?
It Should Be a Crime and Courtship. I didn't write the entire novel during National Novel Writing Month because they're, long. But I wrote the bulk of them during National Novel Writing Month.
Fantastic. Well, how many unfinished ones do you have lying around?
I refuse to answer that on the grounds you might be under contract. No, I don't have any just thrown in a drawer manuscripts. Everything is
A work in progress.
A work in progress that I'm under contract to write.
You guys all write so much faster than I do. You're really able to pour it out. I just don't get that.
Well, the thing, Justine, a lot of your books involve some really intricate research.
Right. So
You
I've
know,
never
mine
done a
involved
historical novel.
riding around a bicycle in London, you know.
Yeah, that's what, like I said, Justine, your books are set in some interesting, fascinating places about interesting, fascinating people. But so do you have anything lying around that you're gonna be working on, or?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm rather proud of this too. As a woman of advanced age, I'm very proud of this. No, don't laugh, don't laugh. Because I'm writing a novel about a violinist. It's called The Hiroshima Violin, which will obviously involve Hiroshima,
Okay.
but also a violin. In order to get the feeling of what it's like to be a violinist, at the advanced age of 412, I'm taking violin lessons.
That is
I'm
amazing.
taking lessons from this little tiny Asian woman who is ferocious. And even after years of being a college professor myself, I'm terrified of this woman. Just bloody terrified. But I practice my violin every single day. I don't get any writing done, but I'm learning the violin.
That is awesome.
That is pretty awesome. Does she whack you with the bow if you you miss a note?
No, but she can give you a look that only a Mongolian woman from Moscow can give, because that's what she is.
All right.
And she's like
You
3 feet tall, and it's all venom.
If we don't see Justine again, it's because she didn't
Right. It means, yeah.
The list of suspects is small.
Well, I was on a panel just recently where Sandy asked an interesting question, and she said, what was the one thing that you bought yourself when you got your first royalty check? But I'm going to ask a little different question. So now, when you get your royalty check, do you have like something that you either collect or you love that you treat yourself to when you get that check in the mail? Justine? Besides your violin?
No, I really don't. And, you know, I treat myself anyhow.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the thing.
You know, if there's something I want, I have no qualms. I go and I get it. Fortunately, my wants are limited. You know, I don't want a sports car. You know, so you know, I just the royalty check comes and think, oh, I can, you know, another $14. I can spend on something nice.
What about you, Annie? Have you gotten? Well, yeah, because yours came out.
Yeah, I have.
My question would be, what was the first thing you bought when you got your royalty check?
I love cooking, so I'll often, when I consider treating myself to something, it's usually to some crazy thing like an entremet silicone, you know, pan for
I thought you were going to say breast
desserts, or you know, a paella pan, like something that's just like you would only use it probably once a year, but you have it, so it feels like a real treat.
Oh, fantastic! How about
Yeah,
you,
we also
Carson?
love traveling, so you know,
Definitely.
when we were allowed to travel, we do a lot of travel. So yeah.
Oh, good. How about you, Carson?
Is a mortgage a treat? I don't know. No, I think you probably know the answer for me, because I generally buy myself a pen, a fountain pen.
No, that's going to be my answer.
It's on my
too.
list. I like fancy pens, but I also like fun everyday carries. So I buy a lot of Kaweco, and that's like one of my go-to fun, like little pocket pens.
The Kaweco you're the one who turned me on to that, to the Lilliput, and I
Oh
bought
yeah,
it
that
so that I could say
fire burnished one. Yeah.
just so that I could say Kaweco Lilliput. It's one of my favorite things to say. No, this last book, with the last check that I got, I actually bought the the Visconti Homo
Ah,
sapien pen.
that's
Which
a
is
grail.
made from, it blended my love of pens and it blended my love of travel. It's made from lava from Mount Etna. So it's a really cool
Ooh.
pen.
Ooh.
I've left it to Carson in my will so that I see somebody outside my house right now. It's ready to shoot me so that Carson can get my pen. But
I'm
so
not
no,
going to do it this close to you saying that out loud.
So what's your most interesting writing quirk? Annie?
It's interesting. I listened to some readers yesterday talking about music, and I don't think I have a quirk. I need the silence. Can't do music while I write. Enjoy a quiet room, and I love writing in the morning. So I don't think that's very quirky, but that's it.
I mean, do you do it like I just mentioned in the last panel? Do you do it with your pants on? I mean, just kidding.
Pajamas. What can I say?
So, how about you, Justine? What's your
Well, I spent so many years sitting on the sofa, on the same spot on the same sofa. There's a dent that now I can't write there anymore. I just, my mind turns off. So I go, fortunately, except for a very brief period in April and May, there's always been some cafe someplace around here because Europeans like them, these little cafes. And I would always go during the time of day when there's no one else. So I didn't have to worry about COVID exposure. And I find out it was much easier to write in another place with a glass of wine, even though the wine would make me a little fuzzy-headed. It just made me relax, and I didn't have to sit on the sofa.
Oh, good. And well, Carson's drinking gin. You're drinking wine. I see a theme here.
This is Europe, so we drink wine.
How about you, Miss Carson? What's your writing quirk?
Well, I am fond of a coffee house writing for sure, and I really, really miss that. I'm not ready to go back now, and in fact, most places won't let you.
Exactly. Have you been to Starbucks lately?
No chairs, no chairs.
You're there to buy plutonium. Please follow this line. Wear a mask.
Get the hell out. But my quirk, I guess, would be that I cannot start writing the book until I have a title, and it not just a working title, but the title. I need it to be set, and I need to know what the title is. I don't know a damn other thing about the book, but I gotta.
That's an excellent principle, by the way. I commend you, because then you can write to the title.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like I know some people come up with the title when they're done, but I just kind of feel like that like puts me in the right direction, the right frame of mind.
So Sandy doesn't come up with all your titles?
Well, it actually does help me with some of my titles, but before I get started.
No, I think I've mentioned this before. I think my writing quirk is I could actually write anywhere. I did love my local Starbucks. I love writing in the mall, but I actually do write. I don't buy the pens just to look at them. I actually use them. So I write out all my books longhand first, which helps my thinking process. There's something about typing and thinking at the same time. I just haven't quite mastered it yet. But unless I'm under a very strict deadline, then I'll give it a shot. But for the most, I have tons and tons of notebooks that are filled, and that's where all the books are. So it's one of those little quirky things. But my other thing, I was just wondering, comparatively speaking, what comes first for y'all? Is it the plot or the characters? Justine?
Oh, for me, it's the event. I always choose a major event and write around that event. Characters come later, the plot comes later, but the plot is based on the event. So in a way, I have a much easier beginning than all the other writers who have to create from whole cloth.
Okay. Annie?
I actually find I start with the setting. I think because I'm trying to present the different provinces and regions in Canada, that I think about the area, and that will often sort of spark the notion of the types of characters that you would find there, and then the plot sort of develops from that. So I start with setting.
All right.
Mm.
Carson?
Yeah, I'm kind of all over the place on that. If I'm inspired by a particular plot idea, great. Sometimes I'll just have characters in mind and then find a plot that would work to drive the conflict between them. Just kind of, I'm open to all different approaches.
All right. All right, we're almost out of time. So one quick last question. What is next for y'all? What's the next book, and when can we see it? I mean, we heard from y'all read today, besides Justine and her violin. But I think, Justine, you should write a book about the little Chinese lady that's, or the Asian lady.
Russian. She's Russian.
That's teaching
Mongolian Russian.
I think that would make a really good book. And
Are you kidding? She'd rip my guts out with the violin bow.
So that is the next book that's up for you?
It's the Hiroshima violin.
All right. Is it finished, or you're in the process of writing it?
I'm just in the process of learning to play the violin. So
Fantastic.
So it's a ways off. It's a year off.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll look forward to it. How about you, Annie? What's next up for you?
Next up, I actually have to admit that COVID has been a bit of a creativity killer for me, but I am starting on a book that involves an RCMP officer, and she meets a professor of structural geology in Saskatchewan. And there's all kinds of intrigue and jeopardy and a dog named Walter. And so it'll be a good romp.
All right, Ms. Carson, quickly.
You bet. Next out is Spirit of the Law, a prosecutor, a medium. And I'm currently writing Her Consigliere, which is a mob book. And there might be a famous visitor in the book. And that's all I'm going to say.
All right. The segue to that is the next one up for me is actually The Devil Incarnate. So if you're looking for some more King Casey, there you go. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank our panelists. Everyone did a great reading. We really appreciate it. So everybody have a great afternoon.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for coming.